Hi everybody, my name's Angel. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the president of Alberta Sex Positive Education Community Centre. I'm one of the original founders, and at the centre, our whole mission is to promote sex positive values. And when we talk about sex positivity, we mean that we see consensual sex as something that's healthy, that it's normal, and that it's diverse. It's different for everybody, and that adults should have the right to explore sexuality in ways that are meaningful to them, not just ways that other people prescribe to them. And that's a really interesting position to be in light of this Me Too movement. We've talked before about the Me Too movement and some of the supports and whatnot that it has brought for people like myself who've experienced sexual assault and sexual harassment. And I am still so grateful for every voice that was brave enough to come forward and have those conversations. My social media is still blowing up with people that are disclosing their experiences and supporting other people who are disclosing, and it's been really beautiful. It's also deeply gratifying to see some very powerful men being held accountable for their actions. And then it's not because I'm thinking vengeance, but because I know so many of us were unable to find justice when we came forward, and instead what we found was blaming and shaming and all of that. So yay to seeing things change, even if ever so slightly and only in certain demographics. We've also talked about some of the pushback, like there's a lot of worry and concern now. There's even like a whole bunch of blog posts have gone up kind of threatening women that the Me Too movement is going to make it so it's going to be harder for us to find people interested in doing all the things with us. I can tell you at Aspect that certainly hasn't been the case, but what we have seen is it has decreased the amount of sexual aggression we see from typically masculine presenting folks who aren't used to having to think about how their actions might impact other people. And while I understand that we live in a society that has created a system in which women always have to worry about how their words and actions are going to impact their well-being, particularly around things like sex and men, I'd rather that it was just compassion that made people really worry about what they do and they say. But I'll take fear as a starting point as long as we continue to try and build that into compassion. And to do that, we're going to have compassion too for the people who are struggling right now. So it's gonna be a very deep hole for us to dig out of, I think, as a society. Today, however, I want to talk more about sexual empowerment, how we can use what we've learned from the Me Too movement to move forward to a place where we can feel empowered. And being empowered is about one, knowing how your body works, and two, accepting your body, and three, finding some measure of peace or pleasure or comfort with your own sexuality. And that can be a journey. It's not something you're going to fix today. Magic words by Angel, no such. And I can tell you that every step of this journey, you're going to face all the biases that you've been taught to have about sex and gender and sexuality and pleasure and pornography and adventures and all of that good stuff. And even once you think you've defeated a bias, it's going to pop up again. Like you're not going to undo your entire life programming just because you want to. It's going to take work, and you're going to have to be willing to be on it. So let's talk about how we can do that. The first thing that I would recommend is making sure that you've dealt with any trauma that you have experienced. It's super important, and there are amazing therapists out there, self-help books even. If you are still finding that the impacts of sexual assault or intimate partner violence is impacting the way that you express yourself sexually in ways that aren't helping, please go seek some help. There are amazing resources. I'll list a whole bunch in the comments here. Once you've made sure that you're on top of trying to be the best you that you can be, we have to start learning about biases. We've talked a lot about gender roles. I'll include some links below for folks who haven't done those modules with us. But it is really important that you recognize how gender stereotypes feed into our culture, a culture that is very sex negative, that harms people regardless of what gender they are. it's not healthy for anybody, and we need to recognize how that works so that we can challenge it when it comes up in our own thoughts. And the next thing we need to do is learn about our bodies. So, sex education for adults is one of my passions. We have a PowerPoint. I will put some links as to where you can access that. But there are lots of places you can go for sex ed. Make sure you understand what parts you have, what they're called, and how they work. This is super important. This is your body, and it's amazing, and it can give so much pleasure, and it's self-cleaning. Like, check this stuff out. From there, learning what you like and what you don't like. And that's sometimes a journey that's best done on your own, which can be challenging and feel super awkward. But if you don't know what kind of touches you like where, that makes it really hard for you to communicate that to your partner. And then you're playing a guessing game, which can be an adventure, but it's also not as empowering as being able to say, I like a firmer touch there, right? And there's some wonderful websites for people with a clitoris. You can check out Oh My God Yes for some tutorials on different ways to explore external stimulation. And I remember seeing another resource that's just for people with a penis on how to touch themselves, not just on their penis, but all over their skin and where erogenous zones are. So I'll try and find that one and also link it down below in the sex ed folder. Yay, learn your body. But then comes the hard part. And we have to learn to be comfortable with the things that we enjoy to such an extent that we can talk about them. And not to our pals, in the locker room or over coffee or whatever's going on, but to the person that we're naked with, we need to be able to have that conversation. And that can be a little more challenging, especially if the things you like aren't what you've been taught from porn or sex ed that are the norms or whatever. I'm kinky as fuck, so conversations with me tend to be a little out there. And I still find that there's lots of people that are willing to have that conversation and feel just like I do. So I'm sure you can find people that want to have the conversations about the things that interest you. The flip side of that is we have to learn how to be a safe space for other people to tell us about their sexual interests. And that means even if your partner tells you something where you're like, I am never doing that and I am so judging you right now, you need to work on the judgment part. It's okay to not want to do the thing. It's not okay to decide that because it's outside of your boundaries that it has to be outside of theirs or there's something wrong with them. Humans are so diverse. And the way we look at sex is subject to our experiences. It's subjective to all the things we've learned, the partners we've had, the books we've read. There's so many things that come into play. So don't judge. And definitely do not weaponize somebody else's fantasies as a way to emotionally berate them in an argument sort of thing. So if somebody discloses to you that they'd love to have group sex, you don't get to use that as a fighting point in the next argument, okay? So that's called being a safe space, respecting the fact that your partner's needs, interests, and desires aren't always going to match yours, and that's okay. The other aspect to sexual empowerment is having a curiosity about what works for your partners and what works for you. So being able to do that exploration, to talk about what worked and didn't work, to ask for guidance and to give guidance is part of that sexual empowerment thing. But before we get naked in bed, we have to figure out how to get a yes, how to hear a yes, how to recognize a not yes, which means no. And that can be a little more complicated, right? So let's talk about the components of an enthusiastic yes. So for all those who are taught to be ashamed of their sexual pleasure, their sexual selves, their sexual interest, you might have to practice this. Because if you don't give your partner the enthusiastic consent they deserve when it's things that you want to do, you're asking them to be okay being unsure of whether or not you're consenting. And that's not a good place to put your partner in. It's not a good place to be in. And if you're somebody who has never asked someone whether or not they want to do things with you, it can be as easy as laying out a fantasy or just telling them you really want to kiss them and then letting them set the tone. If it's somebody where typically you're the one doing all the next stepping of the intimacy, maybe tell them that until they do it to you, you're not going to do it to them. So you're going to let them guide where things go. So if they take off your shirt, you can take off their shirt. And then be watching for body language, right? So if somebody's body language changes, you stop, you check in. Would you like to stop? I'm totally cool if you want to stop. Am I moving too fast for you? Would you like to slow down? These are all totally acceptable. Anyways, this is Angel. I hope that gives you a little primer on sexual empowerment. I've included some healthy communication stuff and some things about sex and shame in the links. I hope you enjoy the many resources that we're attaching to this. And I am hoping that you have a very sex positive journey. And remember, it is a journey. It's not always going to be perfect. But as long as we all try to continue to work past feeling shameful or entitled to other people, I think it's going to be a better place. Thanks.